In this video, I'm going to be talking about what music theory is. My name is Mathew. I'm a composer and cellist and the founder of the Sound Painter Studio. I got my PhD in music composition at Northwestern University, and now I'm on a mission to help other musicians and composers to gain the skills and confidence to be able to bring their music to life. So, what is music theory? Music theory is just making observations about how music or sound behaves. We can theorize about any style or genre. It's not specific to one country, culture, genre, period of time, etc. And this is not exclusive to notated music. You can theorize about any kind of music. And so if music theory is just making observations about how music or sound behaves, then you can do that with any kind of music or any kind of sound or any kind of environment, right? So you can theorize about anything that is sonic. When it's music theory, it's specifically about things that we consider to be music. If you were to start a listening journal and just make observations about the characteristics, patterns, etc. of the music that you love, then you will have started theorizing about it. And I highly recommend that you do that. Now, before we go on, there's something that's really important to note. You do not need to be able to read music to be a great composer. Some of the most famous songwriters in the world famously can't or could not read music. One example that I always like to think about and to share with people is Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney has famously talked about how when he speaks to so-called learned musicians, that's what he calls them, people who are academic university types, they are surprised when he tells them that he doesn't read or write music, and he's one of the greatest, by many people's standards, one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th and 21st century. Right? Now, I'm not saying that Paul didn't understand or use music theory. I'm just saying that he didn't use his lack of music notation or music literacy skills as a crutch to avoid writing songs. He knew how to form chords on the piano, he knew how to sing, and that's pretty much all he needed to get started. So we have to really break down these beliefs that we have about music theory and about needing music theory to be able to write songs. Yes, it's going to help you to a certain extent. It's going to give you insight into why certain chord progressions work. It's going to help you to break through some of the creative blocks that you might be having. But to get started, you actually don't need to read music, and you don't need to be able to analyze a score from a composer who's been dead for 200 years. Another example, one of my favorite musicians and composers is Omar Rodriguez Lopez, and he's the guitarist of the Mars Volta. He's one of the most inventive songwriters and is insanely prolific. You can just Google him. You'll find that he's written, at least as far as I know, 57 solo albums, which is insane. It's sort of like the Frank Zappa of our era. And also all of his collaborative projects, like Within the Mars Volta, At the Drive-In, Bosnian Rainbows. It's just a ton of different projects that he has had, in addition to being a producer and a filmmaker. So an insanely prolific artist. And he never took a single music theory class. And to this day, he does not read music notation. But that doesn't stop him. And he's one of the most inventive songwriters that I can think of. So if you have not been composing because you think you need music theory, you have to realize that this is just a limiting belief. And I'm guilty of this myself. When I was in college, I thought that I needed to go through the usual university theory sequence before I was able to compose. And so I waited 2 years before I actually started composing. And I always regretted that. So I don't want that for you. It's like if when we were children, we avoided drawing or painting because we hadn't studied anatomy or figurative drawing. It's just kind of a ludicrous idea. We just grabbed a crayon and started making some marks on the page. And when we got bored, we stopped. Over time, you learned what you liked to do and what you didn't like to do. And as composers, we should be the same. We have to access the same sort of play that we had when we were children. If we just wanted to start banging on some pots to make some noise or singing, we would just do it. And there was no questioning whether it was good or not. There was no ego involved. It was just a toy. It was something that we were playing with. And we have to kind of access that mindset if we want to start composing and being creative. We can't limit ourselves because we don't have the technical prowess or savvy to be able to bring our music to life in the way that we think we're supposed to. If you just start doing it, you're going to get better at it by observing what you've done and by accumulating a vocabulary of things that are interesting to you. So you actually don't need to learn music theory in the formal way to get started. If music theory is simply making observations about how music or sound behaves, then just be observant. With time, if you just start experimenting, you'll figure out what you like and you'll gain your own vocabulary. So if you're watching this video because you think you need it to start composing, you actually don't. I would actually encourage you to just pause the video and go to compose. I would prefer that you spend your time composing, even if it's for 5 minutes, and then come back once you're ready to start learning about music theory. Because you don't need these videos. You only need to break this limiting belief, leave the ball and chain of this idea that you need to learn music theory to compose, because what you actually need to compose is time and attention. That's it. So if you're not composing because you think you need music theory, the real reason is that you're not giving it time and attention, because all you need to do is sit at the piano and start thinking about what you want to hear and then writing it down, even if it's not using traditional music notation. So you can do that in a lot of different ways. And I'll talk about music notation in a future video. If you're still here, stop the video, go compose, come back when you've gotten some creativity out of your system. I'll see you in the next video.